everyone. You're listening to the Horseshoe Theory on the wonderful 88.1 FM for the local Fargo Moorhead listeners. If you're listening to it around the world, thank you for joining us and listening to our opinions and takes about stuff that we like to think we know stuff about. My name is AJ Albaj. The illustrious co-host is.
And I am Bradley Foster.
And we're going to talk about kind of two smaller things. It's not exactly a slow news week, but for us and stuff that we think is fun to talk about, it is a little bit of a slow news week. So we're recording this on December 6, 2020, a little bit earlier than usual. I'm going camping, so I got to take some time away, you know what I mean? Get away from the virus, too, because I'm going to be in nature. But speaking of coronavirus, we're going to be talking about the coronavirus stimulus negotiations that are currently happening in our federal government. What have you thought of it so far, Bradley? Do you think negotiations are going well? Do you think that anything's going to happen? What exactly do you want to happen from these negotiations?
Well, first off, I do like that these negotiations are a really good example of the, poli-sci 101 that they teach you, that groups meet in the middle. Because the Senate's coming out with a bare bones $500 million stimulus. And the progressives in the House, of course, originally wanted, $2.2 trillion? So I do love that $900-ish billion is right in the middle. I think that's great. But everything else about this bill sucks. So, let's start. And really, it and going into the specifics, it's trying to do this weird thing where it's like everyone agrees that we need to do something, but that something is very, very vague. And what I really read into it is it's a lot of, I don't know, I see a lot of engineering going on, but to be honest with you, I'm not sure that this is, if we're going to do something, and even as a really hardcore libertarian, you could convince me we need to do something. I don't know if this is it, Chief. What are your takes on the bill? I personally think it's too much of a mess, too convoluted. There are simpler ways to bring more effective relief, especially now that we have more or less a timeline with the vaccines coming out. I think it's really... It's just such a ham-fisted way to do it, It pleases nobody, and it should make everybody angry.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And to directly address your point of, this is a compromise on both sides, I honestly think that this is a much bigger compromise from Democrats. You're giving potentially so one of the things that's included in this bill is corporate immunity from essentially sickening their workforce and allowing them to work in positions and in conditions where they can get sick, and that allows corporations to get immunity from essentially poisoning their workforce or maybe even killing certain workers if they're introduced to a lot of conditions and not health safe working environments. That to me is the golden goose. And the fact that in this deal, we're giving, by we, I mean the Democrats, the Democrats are giving up that golden goose, and we don't, and us, the American people, we're not going to see stimulus checks. We're not even going to see like a large increase in unemployment benefits, which is the main thing that's keeping people liquid in this economy, is the increase in stimulus checks. So to me, the idea that neither of those things are in this bill just speaks to the failure of the Democrats to realize the negotiating power that they're in. And when you consider that Democrats probably aren't going to win both Senate seats in Georgia, although who knows at this point, but they're probably not going to. And does anybody realistically think Mitch McConnell is going to work with Joe Biden to actually get another stimulus package in once a vaccine is starting to be distributed? I find that to be next to be impossible.
Yeah, I, for one, don't see that happening in all likelihood either. But to get back to what you said, that there's no, although I could be wrong, but isn't there a minor unemployment thing that's being proposed in the $900 billion proposal? Not
Mm,
nearly as extensive.
not that I saw. If there was here we are. It's $300 per week for the 4 months, which to me is not long enough because if we're talking 4 months from now, we're talking about April. I don't think things will be to normal till the fall.
Yeah, well,
It
regardless,
yeah.
what's missed a lot about this, and I think there's an easier way to do this, which sounds kind of crazy for me to say, but literally we could just be giving people money and this would all work much more effectively.
That's what
All
every
right.
other country did, right? Most other countries are just giving people money.
And here's the thing, like Americans have this visceral gut reaction to like giving people quote unquote handouts, you know what I mean? Like for some reason we just feel better in this country about using a system or something so that no one quote unquote games the system. But really, like corporations are just gaming the system right now. The landlord issue. You know what else is being talked about from a landlord perspective and in some renter advocate groups? And both sides are actually, oddly enough, working together from what I've seen on this particular issue that no one likes to address. You know what's going to happen once these eviction proceedings run out, right? A
Yeah,
lot
when
of
the
people that otherwise would have been evicted, it's going to create a huge backlog. It's going to create, like, not only are we inefficiently solving problems, we are creating more problems than if we just gave some type of monthly UBI or whatever the case may be. You know what I mean? And the other thing too is that it's actually pretty. It can if the systems actually process you. I know people that received like literally thousands of dollars of unemployment back payments at once, which is cool. But that was months of not having any income. Not everyone qualifies for unemployment. You know, if you're like a recent grad and you're in a really weird circumstance or you didn't have a chance to get all that time working required, you can be SOL. So I think that just it's it's really just an attempt to do too much while also doing nothing. It's really convoluted. It's There's this very weird neoliberal faction that thinks that you can just change the incentives, quote unquote, and I don't know. It's a very just I don't know. It's the KISS simple. Keep it simple, stupid. I think that should be plastered atop all of our government buildings.
I completely agree with almost everything you said. And regarding the eviction backlog, I mean, that's the thing that I feel like Congress or our leaders, they're not taking into account. So if you're behind on your mortgage payments, right, you're not going to get evicted. That does not mean that your house will not be foreclosed on. If you're renting, you have an eviction moratorium. That does not mean you will not be evicted when this is all done. I mean, just think about it this way, right? You lose your job, okay? Unemployment, the state unemployment offices are just backlogged. So you aren't able to get your unemployment checks. And then you can't pay rent. Well, unless you get those unemployment checks before the eviction moratorium runs out and that those checks are big enough that you can pay off all your debt, you're going to get evicted when the moratorium lifts. So we're talking about it's the same thing as the housing crisis that happened in 2008, right? The government said, okay, we're going to give the money to the corporations and not the people. And what happened? People lost their homes. Hundreds of thousands of people lost their homes, all due to just straight up cowardice by the Obama administration. So, in my opinion, I feel like it should be an easy fix. But this is the American government, and like you said, there is a real feeling among our elected officials to not give handouts. I mean, even Biden's talking about people don't want handouts. People do want handouts right now, man. There is a pandemic that's making it so that way people can't work. And the government is the one that's putting in the restrictions. If the government is creating the problem, the government should be fixing it. And that involves handouts. It's simple mathematics, right? The government is not allowing you to work. because, we have to try to keep the hospitals not full, right? So that's why the government doesn't want you to work. But then all of a sudden, people can't pay bills and stuff. Well, the government needs to solve that problem that the government created, right? It's not, I feel like we're talking basic common sense, right? But when it comes to, Washington politics, they're just worried about selling the politics of, oh, we gave everybody money, as if people are going to hate them for giving them money.
Yeah. I think that's the other, and there's another part that we're not talking about, and that's that the pandemic is, what I hope that people take away from it is that there is a lot of things that we can be doing a lot simpler. And I think the other thing that we need to approach too, that we've been kind of good about, not as great as we should have been, but what we've seen, like, regulations lift, right? We've seen people do new types of, for like dining and outdoor alcohol consumption, for example. We've seen all types of new innovations come in. And I'm really interested to know, because one of the cool things about the pandemic is that it has offered some, as companies and people have adapted, some new choices to make our lives like a little less, miserable for the American experience in 2020, right? There have been some, I don't know, I like eating outdoors in the summertime. I think it's pretty cool. I like being able to have a screwdriver outside. It makes me feel kind of free. Forget it all. But it'll be very interesting because the trend, and you know what really it comes down to here? They are giving money out. Of course they are. They're just doing it to the people that also coincidentally give them money. Right?
Yes.
Joe Schmo, AJ Alvarez, Bradley Foster. I mean, and even if we gave all of our, like, total income that we could, other than to keep a roof over our heads, keep gas in our car, and, like, keep food on our table, like, we could never, ever match the impact of a few of these select. And people always like, oh, it's the Cokes, and it's not just them, but there's really some huge, huge influence, and it's spread all over, right? It's a very dissuade influence. But what we've seen is that those influences are always, we are giving handouts. It's just going to, I don't know, big bangs. It's going
to Lockheed. It's going to Boeing. It's going to those corporations that, sure, they employ a lot of people. Great. They can employ people by using the free market, not by getting handouts from the government, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And to me, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And it's the exact same mistake that happened in the 2008 banking crisis, where, one, there was not enough stimulus provided to the economy. I mean, remember the recovery from the banking crisis, 2008, the Great Recession? That took forever. And why did it take forever? The stimulus was too small, and they didn't actually address the real problems, right? They just gave these handouts to the banks. They didn't persecute the bankers that created the crisis, and people lost their homes, and now homes are still sky-high prices, which is good for homeowners, bad for people like me who want to buy a home. They're still sky-high because now we have all these, equity firms. We have all these private firms that are buying these homes, and in some states just keeping them empty. I mean, they're not solving the problems, and they're continuously not solving the problems. And it doesn't even sound like anyone really, there aren't very many people that have the political courage to try and solve the problem, which is that the government is not allowing people to work, and the government should be paying these people to not allow them to work. If you're a restaurant worker and you're working 1 or 2 shifts a week because that's all you can get, and even then the restaurant is empty, you should be getting money because you don't qualify for UI, and you have no idea how you're going to feed your children. You have no idea how you're going to pay your rent. I mean, just look at the bread lines we've seen, right? I mean, there was a CNN article 2 weeks ago. It said 53 million Americans are going to go hungry this Thanksgiving. It's just unconscionable. It's just unconscionable to me that we're worried about, oh, we shouldn't be, we might give a rich person a handout, even though we're helping poor people. Who cares? Who cares? It's all, if we're trying to say that we have an equitable society and we're trying to help the most people as quickly as we can, I really don't care that Elon Musk got a $1,200 check. Okay, he doesn't care about that $1,200 check either. Look, that's such a tiny fraction of his money. For him, that's like, oh, cool. That doesn't help me at all, but I don't care. You know, if you're making $400,000 a year, you see that $1,200 check and you go, oh, cool. I can buy some Zoom stock. Okay, cool. Like, I don't care. The $1,200 goes such a long way for people to be able to eat, people to be able to pay their bills, and that's what we should be focusing on. Not the idea that some rich person might get $1,200 that they put back into the economy.
Mm-hmm. And I think that there's another huge component here that really, really has been missed in all this COVID lockdown, blah, blah, blah. And that's this, that we have especially made it very, very difficult. And like we've obviously been talking about the stimulus as an example, but I think it goes much further than this. And it's the fact that the wealthy and the privileged in this country, by operating the levers of government, have always been able to set their own rules and then break those rules with minimum consequences when they decide that they don't want to be nice. For example, AJ, have you heard about the feeding the homeless issue that they were having in Dallas?
Oh, is that where they like didn't have permits or something and they
Yep.
made them throw away the food?
Yep.
Yeah.
Did you ever see the follow-up?
No, I didn't see the
I believe it
follow-up.
was in Dallas. It was one situation where it was like they didn't have permits and the police came and harassed them, so they started carrying AR-15s and firearms to feed the homeless. And do you know what magically happened? The police decided that they had better things to do than harass people for feeding the homeless. Do you know what never happens? Politicians and the rich and wealthy, they never, ever have to get anywhere close to that kind of desperation. I mean, imagine if the homeless advocates could just walk in and have a discussion with the city councilman about, I don't know, making sure people don't go hungry. But clearly, those conversations aren't happening in this country.
Or
It's
providing them, well,
shame.
they're homeless, providing them homes, right? If they have a home, they are no longer homeless.
Yeah, well, obviously we need to look at how we implement solutions like this. But, I mean, homelessness is another great example of where effectively we do nothing. And there's so many interwoven things that everything we throw at it seems to, I mean, it just kind of seems to get sucked into the void. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you know, this is something that I think is an issue with the system, right? And I'm by the system, I mean our system of government. Is our system of government really requires compromise? But in today's polarized politics, those compromises really suck. And also, the compromises don't actually address the problems, and compromises rarely happen with divided government. I mean, the fact that we had the CARES Act during divided government just goes to show like how crazy this pandemic is. Even during the Great Recession, right? The Obama admin, they pushed like only a $800 billion stimulus, and the CARES Act was like what, 1.6 trillion. I mean, it's ludicrous to me that I just hate bringing it up, but like that we didn't get more during the banking crisis. The Obama admin went in and didn't even try to sell a bigger stimulus, and political malpractice. But that's beside the point. But for this one, we're doing a very similar thing now where stimulus is still needed because we are resurging. And this bill doesn't make anybody happy, which is kind of the nature of compromise. But the people it really doesn't make happy are the American taxpayers, who are really getting shafted.
They, in fact, are. You know, we should do another episode about talking about the road from the 2008 financial crisis to now, because that would be really interesting, and I'm sure that we have a ton of different narratives to say on that. Pro tip, we're not going to like Obama, but for wildly different reasons. But getting back to the issue at hand.
One more thing I got. So we gave the airlines, and just to give you an idea, we had the PPP. It was like paycheck protection plan or something. People applied for these loans that could be forgiven if you keep people on their checks. Okay, cool. A lot of those, that's a crazy administrative burden. So congrats to McKinsey, Deloitte, all of those consultants that got huge government contracts to process those applications, and then the money ran out right away. So that's just one example of a corporate handout where they're willing to forgive, businesses. They're willing to give businesses money and then forgive it. But giving Americans money and forgiving it, oh, that's too much. And then let's not forget that we bailed out the airlines $25 billion and they still laid off 90,000 people. We gave them $25 billion to not lay off people. And then they did it anyways. It's just crazy to me that we're out here not even trying to negotiate for the government to do something to make sure that this money that we're just handing out to corporations is used smartly. During the airline bailouts, the airline said, "Oh, if the government takes any equity or is involved in our board, we won't take the money." Then don't take the money, because guess what you did? You just took the money, gave it to your shareholders. You probably did some you did a bunch of stock buybacks for the past decade that made it so that you were financially insolvent. You then asked the government to give you money. Then you go give that to the executives, exactly what the bankers did when they created the banking crisis, and then you lay off 90,000 people anyways. It's just, to me, how do politicians just think that, oh, this time it'll be different? We're Charlie Brown with the football.
Oh, they know it's going to happen. That's part of their pitch. Like I said, those are the people that are giving them consulting jobs after they retire. These are the people that are writing big old fat checks. And I think really fundamentally what we're talking about is we have this weird top-down addiction in this country, okay? We have an addiction to making sure that everyone's going to do their blah, blah, blah. But the fundamental fact is, whatever the stimulus numbers would be, okay, $1,000, $1,200, heck, even, $500 in the pockets of every citizen who knows what they need. I mean, and honestly, if you need to, some people are entrepreneurial enough where you can turn $500 and, I don't know, resell some stuff on Facebook Marketplace and turn it into 6 or 7. You know what I mean? So I really think that if we're looking at actually helping people, if you or I were on hard times, you or I would know what we need better than anyone else. I think that's the fundamental disagreement. The businesses, even if they cared, and clearly the businesses were just laughing behind their backs while rubbing their hands maniacally the whole time with their monograms and cigars, right? That's an old-timey evil person move. But you or I, or anyone, knows what they need to make their lives better in that instant. And furthermore, you can do so much. It's just so much simpler to give the aid to the average person. But as we've discussed, unfortunately, there's no one lobbying for the average person in Washington, D.C. You know what I mean? There is no average Americans committee. We don't have the funds. It's in our name. We're average. It's an unfortunate fact of the system that we've been so married for the past 100 years with this top-down obsession in how we govern and in how we administrate our country, that when it comes to common sense things like, I don't know, oh, everyone's broke, let's give them $1,000 so that they can, I don't know, feed their kids or stay in their apartment or whatever. To think that we're going to go through all these weird administrative hoops and then make it better, that just doesn't fly. And you know what? If we actually, and our legislators actually gave a damn about the people, it would be obvious from day one. But
I still think it's a little funny. You're a libertarian, and your libertarian take is remove the administrative burden and just give people money. That was not. I just figured a libertarian would say, free market.
I mean, normally, if it was a normal whatever stock market cause the economy is blah blah blah, but it's a literal pandemic where people are getting arrested for opening their restaurants and stuff. I was a server and I was laid off for a while there. through no fault of my own. That's the big thing. The government, and I get that people would be eating out less anyway because of the pandemic. Even if the government was just like, hell yeah, do whatever. But because the government is putting these burdens in, it's just like if the government charges you with a crime, whatever it is, you have a right to a public defender. Unfortunately, as we discussed about recently with public defenders, the options for public stimulus, unless you're a member of Lockheed Martin or Boeing, are also not very great.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. It's just always it's always amazing to me, Bradley. We call this the Horseshoe Theory because we've chatted a bunch and we see opposite sides on many issues, but glad we can come together and say, just give people money. It's like, it's easy politics. And this is something that I wonder if we'll ever know, but with the checks earlier, and if you didn't have a bank account when you paid the IRS, you got a check signed by Donald Trump for $1,200 when you pay, if you were a taxpayer. So to me, we all, and it might not have been reflected in the polls, but at the end of the day, how many votes were changed by, oh, I got a check in the mail from Donald J. Trump for $1,200? Like that's something that I don't think we'll ever know how much that made a difference, but could that have changed votes along the Rio Grande Valley, which went hugely for Trump, compared to what their normal blue is? Could that have changed their minds, considering that it's one of the more underbanked communities in the U.S.? Potentially. To me, it's easy politics too. I'm fighting for you to get you money.
Yeah, exactly.
There is some bipartisanship right now. So I saw that Josh Hawley and AOC and Bernie Sanders. Now that's a group you wouldn't normally hear, right? Josh Hawley with those two, but
sounds like a Hard Times headline,
right? But when you think about it, Josh Hawley is just conservative populism, so it makes sense that he's fighting for a populist push for money. But it's easy economics, it's easy math. I feel like we're just talking into the void, which we kind of are. Thank you all for listening to us talk into the void. But at the same time, why isn't anyone listening to the people when they say, give us money?
I think this really sums up everything we've talked about with this. Really even going in over the whole program. It's a very, very big club from Washington, D.C. to Bismarck, North Dakota. And you're not in it, listeners.
Hey everyone, thank you for not touching that dial and staying with us here on 88.1 FM in the great Fargo-Moorhead area. You're still here with the Horseshoe Theory. This is AJL Bosch here with my co-host Bradley Foster, and we're going to discuss the Biden cabinet picks and kind of, we're not going to talk about them each individually because that would be boring and you would hear not much analysis. So instead we're going to talk about, well, what do we think Biden's going to be like for the next 4 years? And then why or why not do the cabinet picks say that? So Bradley, give us a sneak peek here. Give us your prediction. What is Biden going to be like for 4 years?
Well, I'll say this. When I was reading the Biden cabinet picks, my thoughts instantly went to one place, one specific location. A bread aisle. As a matter of fact, the part where the white bread is. As a matter of fact, the very unpopular brand that had not been touched in months. Because this, in policy alone, this is the most neoliberal, bland, if I may say so. This goes down like what I imagine to be Biden's favorite mid-afternoon snack, like cold tapioca pudding. It's, as we talked about with assuming, it's not going to make anyone happy, and it's very, very, I don't know, I guess to me as someone that was hoping that maybe we could get, I don't know, sometimes I just like politics to be interesting, right? I'm already libertarian, so I've already accepted that I'm not going to get all the policy ones I want, but I don't know, it just kind of felt like a cold shower, it's very, It's like he's trying to take like he's just trying to stick together the Obama administration with like duct tape and bubble gum. That's my hot take. What do you think, AJ?
So I agree with you that it's like boring neoliberalism, but that's for the domestic stuff. For foreign policy, it's all neocons. It's all neoconservative policyholders that have been horrendously wrong about everything that's happened for the past 2 decades. But to talk to your point about Biden just trying to duct tape together the Obama administration, isn't that what he ran on? That was like his campaign promise, right? Was return to the Obama years or build back better or whatever the boring, better things aren't possible was essentially the Biden promise, right? So to me, it's pretty expected. He ran as somebody who would not upset the apple cart. He's told corporate investors, Wall Street investors, all of them that things aren't going to dramatically change for them. And this is the cabinet pick that kind of reflects that, right? I think the best one to look at for, corporatists influencing policy, this is someone that I personally hate on a real personal level, because I think she is a terrible person. But Neera Tanden, she, for those that are the uninitiated, Neera Tanden is nominated to be the director of the Office of Management and Budget. She was president of the Liberal Center for American Progress Research Group, so they're like a liberal think tank. But while she was there, she made things arguably much worse. She sold out corporatist interests. There was a paper that was going to be released by the Center for American Progress talking about Michael Bloomberg's anti-Muslim practices. Bloomberg donated money, and that whole chapter was removed. So, I mean, just to give you an idea, they want someone who has experience in selling out the American people to corporate interests. They want her to be in charge of the budget. So that's my take. It just goes to show me that we're going to get 20 years of the same thing. The past 20 years for economic policies and corporate interests is just going to happen again for the next 4 years.
Well, and I want to be very clear with both you, AJ, and the awesome listeners to this show, and what the hell Duke do. I consider Obama and that type of thing to be neocons. You don't make the moves that Obama did without being a neocon. I don't care that he abandoned it up. I don't care that he says that he wanted to do other things. I don't care. I wouldn't care if Obama starts running on a Vermin Supreme platform and says, you know what, change the Constitution, I want to run again, I'll make a time machine, and I'll go back in time, and I'll stop myself from preventing those war crimes. He is a neoconservative. So, fun fact of the day, Obama's a neoconservative.
I agree. Those that try to paint him as some communist or some socialist or whatever, like, this guy is Obama's very much not for any of that. He personally vetoed Bernie Sanders becoming the Democratic nominee when he called a bunch of different nominees to drop out on the same day and get behind Biden. I mean, I don't know how much more evidence you could want that he hates socialism and communism or whatever else you want to say, because he is, as you said, he's a neocon, especially when it comes to foreign policy, but even domestic policy wise, far from, being a progressive hero, on top of building the cages that locked kids up and everything. It's going to be the Obama administration, except this time probably with more women and more people of color committing war crimes.
Absolutely. And can I just say something that's always irked me is, not even as a libertarian, is just like, and I think it's kind of a Midwestern value, is that the only things that you can really get mad at others for doing to a certain extent are things that you do not do, right? You know what I mean? Like, I, Bradley Foster, cannot possibly get mad at anyone on earth for, like, I don't know, driving too much. Because, yeah, on occasion I like to go to a road trip just to drive. You know what I mean? For a small example. But, man, Obama much like Kamala Harris, is now the VP elect, made jokes about smoking weed in college. Okay, he was like, "Oh yeah, the last time I was this, I was in my inauguration." He said at one of the correspondence dinners. Hilarious, cool. Now, could you please alter federal policy that you were what? The best thing that you can say about Obama is that he didn't raid the dispensaries. The best thing you can say about Obama is that he didn't actively stop medical marijuana, and he didn't, although he did pretty suspicious at times, actively kick in the doors in Colorado and Washington. Like,
Yeah,
really?
yeah, he could
I
have.
always hated him for that.
Yeah, and Jeff Sessions wanted to do that too. Remember, when he came into office, when he became AG, he was like, "We're gonna go after them for smoking the devil's lettuce," as if this is the 1960s. So I completely agree with you on that, and hopefully they at least remove marijuana from Schedule 1 drug classification, which is completely within their right. That is completely in the Controlled Substances Act. That is completely within the power of the executive. And the fact that Obama in his 8 years didn't do anything to me, unreal. He doesn't. The executive doesn't have the power to expunge records or anything. But come on, come on. We can at least stop from new records being made, right?
Exactly. And can I just say, really, really quickly, is one of the examples, you've heard of the Silk Road, right, AJ? I
Oh
assume you
yeah,
have.
yeah,
For
and
those
Silk
that,
Road 2.0.
yeah, for those of you that don't know, the Silk Road tangent, it won't be too long, was a thing. It was an online website where people could use the dark web and use Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies to buy all sorts of things. But the most common thing bought and sold on the Silk Road 1.0 was personal use marijuana. Ross Ulbricht, the guy who ran the one of the people who ran it, wasn't the sole person. Got caught, got absolutely railroaded. They actually ended up prosecuting some of the prosecutors on that case. The jury was without a doubt tainted. There's all kinds. Please, please, please Google Ross Ulbricht railroaded. Please, please, please. Or just Ross Ulbricht, free Ross Ulbricht, because he got absolutely ran over, really in the name of the war on drugs. Like Ross was like the great sacrificial lamb. Do you know how much the biggest meth dealer on the Silk Road got in time?
I don't know. Did they even catch him?
5 years. The biggest meth dealer did 5 years. Do you know what Ross got?
Oh, it was like 3 lifetime sentences or something,
Two
right?
life sentences plus 40 years for a nonviolent first time offense of making a website. So I just want to take this, and that happened under the Obama administration.
Yep.
So I think that there's a lot of what you have called in the past brunch liberals. I think that they're going to be very, very. I don't know. I think that once the nostalgia wears off, some of these people are going to be pretty damn upset that they weren't like, you know, maybe Klobuchar wasn't too much after all.
I don't know about that because I feel like Klobuchar would name these exact type of people, and she would name worse people, in my opinion. But that's beside the point. Returning back to the Biden cabinet, so another pick to me that just signaled that we have not learned anything over the past 20 years, and we're going to return to neoconservative foreign policy. That was 2 picks. So the first one was Tony Blinken. He was picked as the Secretary of State. He's been a long time Biden advisor. And so it makes sense that he would be picked as Secretary of State. So that way foreign governments could think that, he's close to Biden and he has a personal relationship with Biden. They're going to be more willing to negotiate with him on stuff and take him seriously. Cool. All of that makes sense. You want to know what also he's done? He's been a war hawk. He pushed for the war in Iraq, which was wrong. Okay, we don't need to go into that disaster. He also pushed for being endlessly in Afghanistan. He was wrong about resetting with Russia, wrong about intervening in Libya, wrong about China, wrong about Syria. I mean, this guy is just consistently wrong, and he's backed like every intervention that we've had in the past 20 years. So Yay! and,
Yes.
and another pick that gives me the same vibe is Avril Haines. So she is the first woman to be in charge of the national intelligence. Yay! You want to know what also she is? She like defends torture. Yay!
Torture. Back on the menu, boys.
uh, Legitimately, it could be if we get into some sort of conflict where where they think they can sell the American people on torture. Knock, 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 Iran, right? So it's just to me ludicrous that we're putting in war hawks all throughout this administration after Trump ran on really successfully on isolationism, right? And we're seeing that Trump is like messing with the global power structure in the lame duck session. He's pulling all of our troops out of Afghanistan. I don't know if it's right or wrong.
Yay!
I'm happy that the troops are coming out, but a abrupt withdrawal just never made sense to me when you create a power vacuum that allows the Taliban to get more power, right? That to me never made sense. If we're there, we better do it smartly, right? And we're talking about, increased presence in Syria or in Somalia, increased drone strikes. You had some type of we talked about it last week. We talked about the killing of an Iranian nuclear scientist. Like the world as a whole probably shouldn't have war hawks in charge of America, considering that Trump was, while isolationist, also kind of a big war hawk, right? And we saw what that did for 4 years.
Trump was very much. I think he wanted to be an isolationist, but I don't think that he ever really got the opportunity.
He also he wanted to be an isolationist, but also be friends with like Kim Jong Un, and then be an isolationist while also preemptively striking an Iranian like leader. It's just the contradictions of Trumpism. It never really made much sense when you think about it. The different policy stances that he takes, but Trump was a war hawk just at the beginning of this year, banging the drums and trying to get Iran to start some stuff, right?
And I think that's one of the things that really frustrates me as a libertarian, is that I think that, damn, that is a great selling point, right? It's always been a great selling point to, not send. I've never understood why we spent all this time and all this money and all this blood on places that just aren't in our national strategic interest in the first place, much less if they're posing a threat, which is a whole nother discussion. But as we've said before, we're not going to, unlike previous administrations, me and AJ aren't going to open that Iraqi can of worms until we're darn good and ready to. So, but really, what the vibe that I'm getting from it, and I think that this resonates with the rest of the world too, is you have to wonder if they're starting to think that this type of American hawkism isn't just kind of status quo again, because like you said, Trump said some stuff, and boy, he sure did move around about 50 troops in Syria. Did he actually end the conflicts? No. Did he stop foreign meddling? No. Did he make any actual effort to end the American empire and restructure our military? No. So I wonder what this is going to do for our, not only our allies, but also and our enemies, but also kind of the neutral third world, because maybe there is no reprieve is the lesson of the last 8 years,
Yeah, I definitely would think that's the lesson. Trump was an isolationist, but also tried to start a coup in a Latin American country, which, by the way, every American president starts a coup in a Latin American country. But Trump is the first one to not do one successfully in 4 years. It's a huge accomplishment. So, but for me, these Biden cabinet picks, I feel like what the Biden administration is doing is they're kind of proposing two absolutely horrendous people. And then when they pick the lesser of the two evils, it's like, yay, a win for Beltway progressives and Beltway liberals, the DC establishment types that know that, hey, I could potentially be one day them because I'm also a terrible person. But it doesn't actually address, it doesn't actually bring in new vision, it doesn't bring in new ideas. I mean, Biden said that he's looking for people, that we can't keep doing the same things with the same people with the same way of thinking about things, and then goes and nominates all the same people that have been doing the same things that all have the same way of thinking. You know,
real quick. Very rude of you to assume that Biden knows what the hell was going on 5 minutes ago. And 2020 has been rough on everyone, but man, I think that the people that got right in the teeth all along because they were shamed into doing it and shamed into voting against the orange man bad were progressives. Progressives have taken it the worst in 2020. They managed somehow to not get nearly any of their proposed policy agendas done on a federal level. And they also made it so that they're not going to see even an attempt for that to come up. It's just, man, progressives, I think, learned what libertarian or liberty-leaning Republicans learned in 2012, which is, oh, wow, the deck is really stacked. So, yeah, good luck with that one, progressives. We warned you.
Yeah. There's some grassroots progressive individuals that have had some success in 2020, but yeah, as a whole, it's kind of been an L. Besides Orange Man Bad being out of office, it's kind of been an L for progressives, people who are actually progressives, right? Not your brunch Democrats, not your blue MAGA, which, by the way, I actually did see a blue MAGA hat, but with like "Make America Gracious Again" or something for Biden, and they're like selling these blue MAGA hats. It's disgusting.
Thing ever. I mean, and you've got to give it. I don't know. I think that the progressives won on drug policy. Yeah. On the political compass, the phrase "bot immunity" gets thrown around a lot, but hey, that did really well. But other than that, it's going to be a dark 4 years, and I don't know if any of y'all heard that at home, but that was Bernie's window shutting. So, hey, good luck, progressive movement. Good luck.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of progressive energy behind AOC, but there's some new progressives that are also getting a lot of progressive energy behind them. So we'll see if one of them does better, because right now AOC is way too much of a devil to the right.
Too much of a lightning rod.
Yeah, she's got a lot of energy on both sides, and she would be, the left version of Trump in all reality, even though she can actually string coherent sentences together and can talk policy.
If I may, I feel like we might be listening to some people that are disaffected, maybe political science students or young people in general, and they think, I'd like to reform the system and fight, and I'd like to do it like Bernie Sanders, and I'd like to take it even further. Just think, someday if you work your entire life tirelessly towards this cause, you can get about 35 to 40% and get absolutely screwed over in the last seconds due to some floor motion outside of your control. And then you can watch more institutional things happen to make sure that your type of revolution doesn't happen again. I just want to say, if there's any progressive people listening out here that are thinking they're going to get in and do their thing, you may want to evaluate your options, is all that I'm saying. Go on, AJ.
Yeah, we can definitely talk about it on a different episode because, I kind of, growing up a bit younger, I looked at the Democratic Party a lot differently than I do, especially after this election and the way the Democratic leadership has handled this once-in-a-generation pandemic. So with that, I feel, are there any other Biden cabinet picks you want to talk about? One that we know of is Janet Yellen for Secretary of Treasury. What did you think of this? Did you have any opinion on this?
No, I thought it was really, really interesting about and libertarians hate the Federal Reserve, right? It comes with the territory. Like the day that you start thinking, I'm gonna I think I'm a libertarian. An audit the Ed bumper sticker, an audit the Fed bumper sticker actually disappears on your car. I had to remove mine. It was getting looks. But I think it's interesting that there's been a lot of continuity in that. And, I guess the Federal Reserve to a certain extent is just like kind of whatever Yellen's going to do and however the markets react to the vaccine and whatever. I'm not even going to try to make estimates of things that are going to happen within the first 6 months. 2020 taught me that that was a fruitless endeavor. But I feel like the Federal Reserve is really maxed out because even during the rolling years of the Trump administration, Trump loved to complain about it. They weren't really increasing rates. They weren't really getting their balance sheet. They weren't really doing anything because, man, they injected a ton of capital into the economy to boost the economy in the wake of the 2008 recession. Something that I would also have something to say about on another episode, perchance. But I think whatever you think of the Federal Reserve, their policy tools are much more limited because they've already done so much. So, and I don't think that her policies have necessarily been entirely beneficial to the larger economy in the past. But I understand it from because Biden no doubt understands that, how can I put it? The Federal Reserve has already put most of its chips in. You know what I mean? They're kind of playing with like a couple free drink tickets and like a $2 chip. So there's only so much you can do. But insofar as it's an agency that's hamstrung by earlier decisions, I mean, he definitely wanted someone at that position that didn't make stockbrokers wake up, read the newspaper, check out their iPad in the morning and go, oh crap, and start doing something. So it's I don't know. It's a very, very don't rock the boat on this way less effective boat method, choice.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. She is just nothing's really going to change. She's not Mnuchin in terms of just letting corporations do whatever. But yeah, she's clearly from the Federal Reserve, as you already mentioned. In terms of does the Federal Reserve have more things to do? I think they do. I personally think they do. I think they're well within their rights to do more things. I just don't think that they will. But they are right now, pleading for fiscal stimulus because they have pumped so much liquidity and so much monetary stimulus into the economy, and they need some fiscal stimulus to match. But we'll see. I don't really see the Fed doing anything moving forward, but also with Janet Yellen at the Secretary at the Treasury. Yeah, you're right. It's to not upset the bankers. The one consistent in this episode is the corporations really are winning right now, but the Janet Yellen's not going to piss off any bankers like an Elizabeth Warren or or a staunch progressive that would actually heckle Wall Street and heckle banks. That's not. We don't see that with Janet Yellen, and she's also confirmable by the Senate. So that's probably what they were thinking when they picked her. Versus progressive firebrand, definitely wouldn't get past the Mitch McConnell Senate, which is kind of crazy that that's where we're at with the nomination process. But it's the way it is. That's our current government, y'all.
Well, just remember, the Democrats signed their own suicide note when they in fact went for the nuclear option. But hey, we should really do an episode covering the late aughts to late 2010s. I think that'd be a great, great piece because, oh, boy, do I got some weird things to say, y'all. But I think that we've covered most everything that we can babble on about as it comes to this old senile man's cabinet picks. So talked about the folks that'll actually be running the country. It was great to have you on. Thank you again for listening. This has been, of course, the Horseshoe Theory. I am, of course, that guy, Bradley. This is, of course, my great co-host, AJ. And we are, of course, out of time. So have a great weekend, great rest of your week, whenever you're listening.